What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode 313, 313.
A
A
palindrome.
palindrome.
Yeah.
Hey, Jinx, buy me
Hey.
a Coke. My name's Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show. I'm here as always with...
I'm Ron.
I'm John.
And another week, another pod, another episode, another chance for me to see you guys. Very, very thankful for that. I feel like these last few have just been like we mentioned it briefly on one of the last episodes. Like, there's just so much to watch. Like, it feels like, whether it's TV or movies or wherever we're spending our time. So another episode, we're gonna just kind of go through a lot of what we've been watching lately. You know, like some movies, some TV shows. We'll catch up for some shows that we've mentioned already that have had a few other episodes airing or that we may have finished. And then we have a couple movies that came out last week that we'll kind of check in on. We're going to be talking about the Hulu film Vacation Friends. John's going to mention a little bit about him seeing Candyman. And then we've all seen the Bob Ross documentary that is airing on Netflix right now. But before we get into any of that, at the back of the show, at the front here, we're going to just talk a couple of news items like we usually do. And Ronald, you wanted to mention the one... Yeah.
Is Ronald's like clicking and typing louder than usual to you? Because I was hearing it a lot louder.
It's loud?
Yeah. I just didn't know if your microphone was like on top of your mouse pad.
No, it's in the same place that it's always in.
Good. All right, cool.
I went
ambiance.
to the...
It's like being in the newsroom.
Yeah, I went to the...
No, it's like the news just came in. That's what
that's what I'm saying.
So
it's like you're in that room with all the machines in the back. Yeah.
What is that news item, Ronald?
Your tape
So the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think Legendary Films did this one, has now been picked up by Netflix and will be coming out supposedly at some point in 2021. I mean, if I'm a smart person at Netflix, I'm looking to release it in October just to pick up on the...
So it's in the can, right? The articles that I've read are very weird about the way they write about the tense of what's happening with this movie, but it's in the can. Is that it? It's like, because to say it's okay. All right.
It seems to be, but yeah.
I may have just read a really poorly worded article. One day we ought to do a thing. We ought to talk about some of these like entertainment articles that are written in like broken English sometimes, or it's as though they're trying not to use words and they're using like they went to the thesaurus for words they didn't need to go to the thesaurus for. Do you know that tone I'm talking about at all?
Oh yeah.
It always makes me think, is it written in like Eastern Europe and they're doing the best they can with English slang or I don't know, but
I think what it is there's a press release that everybody sees first
and they change the words. They change a few
and
words,
they just don't want to seem like they plagiarizing,
right?
So they just switch some, they start the end of the sentence and the beginning of the sentence and try to make it sound like it's a different thing, but yeah.
But they'll do something weird, like it'll say like it's been 2 years in the making, and they'll change it to like it's been 2 periods in the making. Like they'll change it to something weird that's like somewhere there's a list of synonyms that might include that word. Yeah. But if you know what, I don't know. I'm a picky picker, but anyway, yes. I was very confused when I read about this, but if it's already in the can, then I could see it being like, Netflix knows what they're doing with this, and they seem to know they can get a bump out of the horror stuff. Like I feel like Fear Street had a lot of people talking.
Yeah, definitely.
And this feels like the first thing that's like a franchise that we know that Netflix is putting out that's in the horror genre. This feels like this will be, if this one catches on, if this one does really well, I feel like they can probably produce some in-house stuff, some properties that we may know. I just feel like this will bring about some well-known titles and them kind of doing whatever Netflix does. I call it co-opting. I mean, I don't know what to call it exactly, but you know what I mean? Like they have this, everybody knows at this point that Netflix has this amazing talent of taking something that you thought was dead and bringing it back to life and really making it having a good run on their service. So
like really making it the kind of thing that people talk about for 15 minutes and then stop talking about.
And then stop talking about. Yeah, so like Manifest is, I mean, just to kind of keep it on the Netflix thing, Manifest got picked up by Netflix as well, and they've announced that the 3rd and final season is coming out. It's going to be a 20 episode or so.
I think it's the 4th season.
It's a 4th season.
4th and final, yeah.
20 episodes? 20 episodes. Like, I like what they're doing, man. I mean, I like that part. How do you feel about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre coming out on Netflix?
I think it's awesome. I mean, I think it's good. I mean, this is one of those ones that, I think was filmed in like early, or I don't know when it was done, but it was in early 2020 or mid 2020, I think,
Mm.
from what I was reading. But like, it is a little bit of a unique pickup for Netflix because, at least I guess in the horror genre, I'm trying to remember any other example of this, but like in this whole era
Mm-hmm.
of studios selling off their titles that were supposed to go theatrical,
Yeah.
this is one of the first like big quote unquote like horror properties
Yes. Yes.
that really has gone anywhere, because the horror genre in general, like a lot of studios have been holding it to put it in theaters still because they're still making money in theaters.
Mm.
Candyman's example. I mean, even Quiet Place 2. There's a number of Halloween movies. I mean, the Halloween Kills comes out, Malignant comes out, like these movies that are still they're trying to make money on them. So I don't know. There's a quality thing with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is the movie is like apparently kind of like Halloween did a few years ago, where like it's a direct sequel to the original movie. Like it's kind of wiping the slate clean of the other sequels that exist. So yeah, you're right. Like if it's successful, maybe it's something that Netflix continues with, or maybe it's just the basis for Legendary to continue to do stuff with this property. But yeah, it's a little different because it's been a bit since Netflix kind of grabbed one of these movies that was supposed to go theatrical. They bought a few of the Paramount titles and things like, I remember like The Lovebirds is one of them that they did. Mm-hmm. But they haven't really grabbed a lot of these like theatrical queued up movies in a little bit. So yeah, you're right. If they can get this going and ready to go sometime in October around Halloween, that's pretty great programming on their part against the theatrical movies that are coming out at the same time. But I don't know. I'm excited to see it. I mean, I'm always down to check it out, and especially if it's on Netflix. So I already have that. I'm good.
What about you, John? How you feeling?
I mean, similar. I'm curious to see what the movie itself is, based on what Steve was saying, that it's been reported that it picks up as a direct sequel to the first movie, which is like, we've done these franchise rewatches, and these horror franchises get sort of tangled after a while, and we're about to get to the tangled portion when we do our next episode, wrapping up the Nightmare on Elm Street series. We're going to get to the most tangled era for that series, I guess. But it seems like the Texas Chainsaw franchise is if you're going to do that, this is a smart one to do it with, because it's had a couple like soft reboots and weird offshoot sequels along the way. And I'm very interested to see just what the feel and concept of this is. It seems to be picking up like a few years later with the idea that some of the characters have aged, and it might have a hook and a concept to it that makes it unique. So I'm intrigued by that. But even if it's just the Texas Chainsaw version of what we got with the 2018 Halloween, I'm curious to see what kind of moments they can create, what kind of scenes they can create. Those movies at their best have always had a certain amount of like torture porn element to them, but also a certain amount of just shock, sudden violence, and then also somebody gets an awful fate that's kind of drawn out. So there's a lot of impact you can have in that kind of slasher zone with this. The tone of the Texas Chainsaw movies has always had it's a little bit nastier, a little bit uglier, in a weird way. So there's always the potential for that to be really memorable if someone really nails that.
Yeah. Did you guys check out the No Time to Die trailer that came out this week? Did either of you have a chance to see that?
Yes,
I actually did. That's what all the clicking was.
Oh, look at you!
Yeah.
Look at you! Just
took you that long to type in James Bond trailer.
Like this stuff.
Is it just me, or does it feel like this movie has just like completely lost steam?
Yeah, it is.
Something about it feels really sad, because it's like this trailer is promoting this like legacy of not only the franchise, but of Daniel Craig's run as Bond, as this being his last film in the series. It's like something just feels kind of underwhelming of like this limping to this October release date if it holds it. And I mean, the trailer looks good. I mean, it's like okay, and I'm really excited to see it. I think it looks good, and Cary Fukunaga being involved, like that's
that motorcycle going up the stairs and then like up over the wall is a pretty cool shot, I have to say. I'm sure that's CGI or wires, but it looks pretty. It's got that. James Bond always has a certain groundedness to the action, and but no, I'm with you. I feel like I felt similar when, even though it was never my bag anyway, but when Fast 9 came out and it just kind of came out, I kind of felt a similar way. It's like, well, weren't these movies supposed to be a bigger deal,
Yeah.
And then it just kind of came out. And I kind of feel like it's really strange for this James Bond movie, which has been much hyped, and a lot of lead up to it, a lot of changes, in terms of who was directing and what was going on with it. And it's like, it was finally coming. It felt like it was limping out whenever it was coming out, but now it really feels like it's kind of lost in the shuffle, which, strange for a movie that should feel huger than huge, right?
Yeah. So weird.
I think this thing's gonna bomb.
Bomb?
Bomb.
Wow.
I don't know if people have the bandwidth for something like this right now. I know it sounds weird, but like I don't know if they do, man. I think that they need to put it out next year if they're gonna put it out. And if they're gonna release it this year, just do the hybrid release. I don't know if this thing is gonna do well.
Huh.
I mean, I feel like it's a surefire something, but I kind of know what you mean, Ronald, in the sense that I don't know what value right now the James Bond kind of name has, just in terms of the way people talk about the franchises that they talk about. I just don't know. I mean, I know that it's still out there, and I know that there's still decades of fans that would go see a new James Bond movie, and that's it. So in that way, he's kind of like Batman or Superman or something like that, where it's just like there's certain people that are going to come see it. But yeah, I know what you mean, Ronald, that there seems to be like it just, because I saw the trailer in a theater the other day in front of Candyman. I'm pretty sure it was the new one, and because it was a new one I had never seen before. And I felt like you could even hear the 2 or 3 people in the theater kind of go, afterwards, like they knew they were supposed to be excited and they weren't feeling it, And I was like, and I wasn't quite feeling it either. But I agree with Steve. Like, the action looks good, the stunts look good, the shots look cool. I like Cary Fukunaga. I love all the extra they're throwing in this new 007 thing here. I like seeing Ray Fiennes back as M. What's his name? Is it Ben Whishaw? Is that his name?
Yeah.
I like him as Q. I think there's so many touches that I'm happy to see again. But yeah, for whatever reason, I just don't. It's more about like the culture doesn't seem to be like salivating for a James Bond movie right now.
Think Peace is coming, man. How could this movie come out? This extravagant movie come out where people are suffering from in the middle of a pandemic? I'm telling you, man. Like, I've been reading these articles that have had like a tinge of like, this feels weird that this is coming out now while people are suffering, essentially. Like, is the studio not aware of what's going on right now, and why is this coming out right now? I'm telling you, man, there's something weird about all this stuff. Like, I think you have to strategize based on superhero movies can kind of get you out of a headspace, right? That's kind of built in. Like, at this point, we know that this is like a saga that goes across, looks like 20 years at this point, right? So,
right.
But this kind of thing feels very like, I'm just saying, I've been reading these articles that kind of have that tagged in. Like, man, this feels inconsiderate of the times. And for some reason that seems to affect the rating, which doesn't make any sense to me, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a timeliness of it. And this, if you aren't careful about the way you release things like this, I don't know if people want to get out of a headspace with a Bond movie. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, I think I feel generally the way you're like, I have that thought about all things that are sort of frivolous right now, or anything that I'm kind of looking forward to that's sort of frivolous. But I think that right now putting those things on the release schedule is almost like a move in the opposite direction of saying, let's make this stuff available to people.
Right.
Let's give people a little something to look forward to. But I kind of know what you mean, that it does feel a little bit like, it's just an odd time to do something whimsical, like go see a movie or care about a TV show. But we've been kind of dealing with that tug of war, or at least I have internally for a year now, of just like, I've always referred to myself as kind of an escapist dork. And I kind of think I've proven it in the last year and a half, but I also think we've also proven that that's sort of maybe in the modern day, that's kind of how we stay connected and stay alive, is through
absolutely. I agree,
pop cultural stuff. But I just feel like I haven't felt that Like, I feel like even Shang-Chi has a bigger cultural footprint right now than James Bond, which is a strange thing to say.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about short term. Again, I'm not talking about decades of whatever. I'm just saying at the moment, I feel like the average audience member would say Shang-Chi, yeah, and would say James Bond, like, oh, sure, whatever, I might go see it. Yeah, I don't know. That would be for me personally, Shang-Chi, I've been planning, might this get me out to the theater? Might I pick a screening that's, sparsely attended? I haven't even really considered, will I do that for James Bond? So maybe I can't imagine what would change my mind about that in the next couple months that would make that movie feel like, gotta see it now. But the MCU does have that soap opera aspect to it, Ronald, that you were kind of referring to. That's like, we're all sort of like, yeah, we want to see the next installment of this thing that we're already logged in for. But that's unfortunate because I don't know, Daniel Craig's a great Bond and this could be an incredible movie. So yeah, I guess the quality of the movie has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's unfortunate, man. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Anything else? Newsy Paloozy?
Newsy Paloozy. I don't think so. You want to get into some of these shows we've been mentioning and getting caught up on here?
Yeah.
What's one we can start with? You guys?
Well, has everybody caught up on Reservation Dogs? Did everybody see the new
I'm one behind.
Oh, you're one behind. So you haven't seen my favorite one yet, but
no.
But all of them have been, I mean, it's just that show. And I've seen people start to mention it. I don't know if you have noticed this, the two of you, but I've seen like people on my feed start to say, oh, Reservation Dogs. And it's interesting that Waititi stamp brings a lot of people in.
Yeah.
And I think the positive representation piece it's a reason. I mean, I got to say, whether it's corny or not, I love that I see that that's something that people get excited about. That some people are just excited that it's a different show than we've seen before. And that's like a thirst is there for these characters and these performances. But Ronald, honestly, when you see the new one even more reminded me of like the way that Atlanta can throw in some little bit of magical realism that you're like, okay, what show am I watching here? This didn't become any less real for throwing in magical realism. And there's a point made in the new Reservation Dogs episode. I'm not going to spoil the plot for you, but there's a point where one of the characters basically is referring to like these magical things don't happen. They don't exist. And then the other person says, you sound like a white man. And I feel like that culture, but honestly, that cultural idea of letting the spiritual world kind of coexist with the natural world and the real world, the grounded world, that is something cultural that this show can get at in a way that's extremely meaningful. And I love the way this new episode does it. And also I just love the character that it digs into. It's, a character actor that I've loved from other shows. So anyway, I can't wait to see what you think of the new one. But generally, are we all just up on this show? I mean, this is just a really fun one.
I love it, man.
It's funny too because you start to see it in the credits. Like I think Taika's stamp is there, his feeling is there, but like, the other showrunner, the other executive producer, like I think he actually is the one that writes the rest of the episodes.
Oh, absolutely,
outside of the pilot. So I mean, there's a voice there too. Come for Taika kind of opens the door, but this voice is being heard for sure, and it's got that kind of vibe to it. But you're right, this newest episode, I can definitely get the Atlanta comparison, but. Just the idea, I think you mentioned it on our thread, like, these kinds of shows where you get to spend a whole episode with someone, a character that would just kind of be a passing moment in a film or something like that is just such a treat, especially when it's this realized, this interesting, and, that there's some sort of like main story that it's kind of weaving in and out of the whole time. So, yeah, I thought the newest episode was episode, I guess, 5, that is. Was great, but yeah, Reservation Dogs. If you're not watching it again, it's on FX on Hulu.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. What else? Heels. Have you guys caught up on Heels?
Oh yeah, I'm caught up.
Yeah. What are you thinking of Heels, Ronald?
I'm loving it, man. It's like doing something that it's showing something that I really haven't seen since The Wrestler, and The Wrestler didn't even go into some of the intricacies of like wrestling and heels and like baby faces and what just the inner workings of wrestling and how serious people take it. I happen to have a couple friends that are like, take this shit seriously, man. Like if you do anything outside of what your character is supposed to do as a heel,
right,
you are messing up the business. You are not a good person if you're not doing good camera work. So like that's another thing too, where like you're being filmed. So you have to kind of play to the camera. So if you're putting somebody in a headlock, you're like looking at the camera like, I hate this person. You know, it's like, these are all things I love. And also the main character, Jack Spade's character, Jack Spade is really starting to like do something a little more than he was doing before. Because I agree with John. Like when we first were introduced to the main character and his brother, there was something about the Jack that didn't seem quite as like, I don't know. He seemed kind of like cardboard. I think he's a good actor, but like, as these episodes have kind of gone on, I'm seeing like there's dimensions to him. He really does have these layers to him that are kind of coming out through these episodes. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah,
man.
good.
What'd you think?
I mean, yeah, I'm a fan. Like so far, I feel like it's going a little slow. Like
It
with the
is.
Ace stuff, with the younger brother stuff, like his kind of, his kind of turn, I guess, without kind of giving too much away of the series. Like, getting to that point, the not just the willingness, but the acceptance, and like what his character's kind of trying, I guess, deal with. And the introduction of like the father into the story makes it a little more interesting, a little more layered, and you definitely want to try to learn a little more about his place in their brother relationship and the family relationship. But so far, I mean, yeah, like you said, Ronald, this deep dive into this culture that is it's a very niche thing in some ways, but it's a very popular mainstream thing in other ways that is a gateway. And that's kind of what I think the show does a really good job of so far, is showing like where this family is, or where this wrestling federation is. They're kind of at that level where like it is a jumping off point, or it's also possibly a point where you just kind of get stuck and sucked in and stay there forever. And you kind of feel that with some of the characters. So it's definitely looking forward to see where they go with some of our these regulars that we see on the show. But I'm definitely I like the show a lot so far. Definitely into it.
Cool.
Sterling Harjo, by the way, is the name of the co-creator of Reservation Dogs. I just feel like we should definitely give them credit, because that's what I was saying, was that Waititi name just being somewhere on there, I think, is what's bringing people in. But it's if you look at who's writing most of the episodes, it's Sterling Harjo.
Yeah, it's him.
Anyway, just wanted to get that name out there so that we weren't giving them short shrift.
Cool.
Other shows. Well, I mentioned a couple weeks ago on the show that I had started a couple of Netflix shows, one called The Chair and one called Brand New Cherry Flavor. And I finished them both. The Chair is like a breezy. It's like 3 hours from beginning to end, because it's a half-hour show and it's 6 episodes. And then the other one is like closer to an hour and it's 8 episodes. But The Chair, I think, feels like one of those sitcoms that is going to get a second season of 10 episodes, and it will be more. I mean, maybe not, but I'm just saying it feels like one of those shows that 6 episodes almost felt like a full season. It felt like it kind of rushed some things, but I really liked its look at academic life and the kind of back and forth of the characters and how they're all kind of morally compromised. But it did some odd plot things that I would be curious to know where it would even go if it had a season 2, but it kind of feels like it wants one, you know what I mean? Like it didn't feel like it didn't it didn't complete the journey of these characters at all. But I love the cast on that, and co-created by Amanda Peet. I didn't really mention that before, but that's an odd thing. She like has written some of this and is like the person behind it. I didn't know Amanda Peet was a creator in that sense. And then Brand New Cherry Flavor, fucked up horror show. Nightmarish visuals, starts weird, goes there hard, stays there. It's you got to give it credit for all the things it does and all the times where you go, oh, well, surely it's going to cut away. Oh no, they're not going to cut away from that. They're going to show you this weird fucking thing that's happening that's right out of a nightmare. I ended up enjoying it. I kind of halfway binged it, like in little spurts, like 2 or 3 episodes in a row. And each time I really did kind of get sucked into the tone of that world. But then each time I stepped away, I was like, I wasn't that excited to get back into that world. If you ever had a show like that, but then when I would put it back on, within 5 minutes, I would be back with it. But no, I thought it was really kind of interesting, and it just made some cool choices and some surprising things. I'm to understand it's based on a book, so maybe it's that's maybe that whole story is contained in the book, but it made enough sense despite being an extremely weird show. But just some disturbing visuals alone. It's got a couple things that you just, if you've never seen a girl vomiting up kittens before, then this is the show for you to see that. If you've never seen a guy get a weird long worm pulled out of his eye, then this is the show where you get to see that. So anyway, brand new cherry flavor. I guess I'm recommend if those descriptions appeal to you, then you will like these shows. If those descriptions sound like you don't want to see them, I will stress both shows are very funny as well, on top of those things I said. So
right.
Okay, and it's right there on Netflix for you. It's that thing of them dumping 19 things in a week. And it's like,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. God damn, so much stuff.
So Only Murders in the Building. We've all seen.
Why don't you guys talk about that? I
you did not
seen that.
You have not seen
I did not know. But why don't you guys talk about that? That's Hulu, right?
Yeah.
How many did you watch, Ronald?
I watched the first 3.
Me too. So we're caught up.
My first thought is, no. My first thought is like, this is doing something that I only really felt when I was watching Bored to Death, which is like one of my favorite shows, HBO show. Go back and watch it if you have HBO Max. Just this like these odd pairing of people kind of trying to make things happen, and their egos.
It's these privileged New Yorkers that live in a bubble that you would think would be uncompelling to watch, because we don't really find those people very interesting in conversation or in life.
They are, man.
But they're funny. And Steve Martin and Martin Short and Selena Gomez, I think they're all great. Like, I honestly thought the tone of this show was going to be more geriatric, a little bit more like, Steve Martin and Martin Short are doing something, like, I honestly, but it's more than that. Like, I feel like whoever else is working on it, or Steve Martin, he's a pretty smart guy, but it's like, it's self-aware. It's not 100% like the hippest thing you've ever seen, but it has a kind of hipness to it. And it has a kind of, I mean, when you mentioned Bored to Death, it's got that kind of quirky New York, only in New York kind of thing of these people, this assemblage of characters, a former actor, a former Broadway producer, and a young woman who's like living in her aunt's apartment. Yeah. In this apartment building, and the other people as well. But the 3 leads, they're fun to watch together. And there's just some fun, like after the 3rd episode, like my wife just turned to me and said, this is a pretty fun show. And I was like, I was expecting it to be kind of amusing, and I was expecting to kind of get wrapped up in it just because I like the people in it, but I didn't expect it to be quite so like enjoyable in that way of just like, it's, I don't know. So that's what I meant about thinking it might be kind of geriatric. I thought it would feel like, when people come back and do something and you kind of pat them on the back for doing something, but it feels like, no, they're getting, and even all the observations about true crime podcasts and stuff, because they're trying to make a true crime podcast, that stuff is fun. I mean, it's like they keep repeating the joke of like, say that again. I want to get a better recording of it. But I feel like there's a humor to that. And I feel like Martin Short and Steve Martin's rapport is so funny. And if you've seen them do comedy appearances together, that they just bust each other's chops nonstop in that kind of catty, old-timey showbiz way of like 2 old actors that are kind of vain. Yeah. And they do that just beautifully. And there's just like scenes where like they'll be walking out of a room and like Martin Short will turn to Steve Martin and say, "Does anybody like you?" It's just it's that kind of thing where it's the sort of like I don't know, the kind of sparring lovers comedy team is like that energy. I think that it's given the show a certain kind of vibe that it wouldn't have with any other performers in it. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's legitimately one of the best comedies I've seen. Period. I mean, like there's something about what's happening. So to let the steam off of like the geriatric stuff is these 2 men, older men, trying to communicate with Selena Gomez, and that's what that part is. That's where all that steam is kind of left out, kind of exerted.
There's that one line where they're about to call her about something, and then
the text message,
and then Martin Short says, they don't like calls for some reason.
Yes, yes.
And we know that he means young people. We know that he means young people. And then Steve Martin is kind of pleased with himself and says, yeah, this feels like a text.
Yeah. And he's like, I don't know how to greet her. So he says to her, like, aloha, aloha.
And it's like with like a sign off, you know, with love or whatever, sincerely. No, I mean, again, but there's not too much of that. They don't overdo that joke of them being, it's a fairly realistic portrayal of. And the other thing, I realized this, and I said this to my wife too. It's like, I was kind of realizing one of the things I was enjoying about it is she's like 20 and they're like 75 or something. Mm-hmm. And there's 0% Woody Allen creepiness. 0%. Yeah. These are actual grown men, you know, and not weird man children. And I think that's something that you can attribute to the performers and to Steve Martin's imagination probably. But I love that there's none of that leering lasciviousness that you know you wouldn't have even thought about maybe in the past, but now I think it would seem really like nails on a chalkboard. So
yeah, it's doing something really special, and like it's being so self-aware really does lend itself to like some cool jokes that really are pretty rewarding as the show progresses. So
and Sting.
And Sting, who I said is turning into Malcolm McDowell, and I didn't mean that in like a insulting him thing. Like if you look at him in Dune, he looks like
he's turning into Malcolm McDowell, but also I think he and Jude Law are somehow turning into the same person. and I don't know, but Terrence Stamp is involved somehow. I don't know how he's involved.
No, I get it.
Stamp is involved, but yeah.
No, I get it. So Steve, I would check it out, man. I think you'd like it. It's
no, like yeah, definitely. It's on the list, man. I can't wait to see it.
If you've ever been in a place with a lot, so I lived in this one apartment building that was downtown near the Pratt Free Library on Pratt. Wasn't Pratt, but it was like where the main
it's Enoch Pratt, isn't it?
Enoch Pratt, yeah, the main library downtown. Right. And this apartment building was very similar to that, man. Like it's like this, all these personalities. Like when the fire extinguisher would get, like, you know, the fire alarm would go off if you touched the fire extinguisher, right? We came downstairs and it's like all these personalities, people that have been there for like 30 years, people that have been there for 6 months, and they all have these like strong opinions about what people do. Like, yeah, the man above me his trash smells like shit, and he always puts it out. It's like all these opinions, and I wouldn't have appreciated that until I got a little older, and you become a curmudgeon after a while. Like no matter how much you try, you do become sort of. You can even be a hip one, but you wind up being like, man, that little thing that person did 5 minutes ago is like killing me. You think about it all day. It's like,
and you don't get much of a chance to compare notes with your neighbors. So you're right. When you're all standing out on the sidewalk, there's a split second where you're getting to talk to somebody that you've glimpsed in the hall before. Yeah, no, there's an interesting thing about that.
Yeah, man.
And you're right. It does feel like that like eccentric, that mix of people that might be in an old apartment building. It really does pave the way for some, like, there's people that you only know through weird things like their trash stinks, or it always smells like they're cooking something weird in there or whatever.
Yeah. It's interesting. So it's worth it, giving it a try, man.
Yeah.
Only Murders in the Building.
Very cool.
So what else have we seen?
Let's talk about some movies, right? That's what we do here.
This is called Movie Schmovie.
Yes.
John, why don't you mention your experience with Candyman before we get into the ones that we've all seen?
Oh, you know, I really like. I thought it was a very confident movie that seemed to know exactly what it was doing, and I feel like by the time you get to the end, you definitely have rebooted Candyman. Whether they intend to do more or whether that's but I mean, if we're talking about these horror movie franchises as a thing that, like, on a certain level, they're successful if you can beat them into the ground. You know, like a sign of a good horror movie is if you can do another one and keep hammering that concept. But you know what I mean, Ronald? At the end of this, there's a new version of Candyman, but it fits the rules of the old one, except a few things have kind of adapted and they've added a few wrinkles to the mythology. And I thought it was pretty cool the way that it acted as a reboot and a sequel, as often these movies can do. And you know, if anyone's wondering, like, how much do we call back to the original, the OG Candyman being Tony Todd, that, you know, it's that's in this movie. The focus of this movie, though, is a different vision of what the Candyman, almost like what this avenging spirit means, and what has happened through the ages. And it definitely, I thought, pretty. So often these movies, Ronald, when we talk about like social issues, we say, did they really deal with it? And I think this movie actually did a pretty good job of dealing with it enough, but still keeping it in the realm of like pulpy horror, where it didn't feel like it was becoming too much of a message movie. You know what I mean? It's still an entry in a slasher franchise, but I thought they did a really good, like, gut punch version of connecting this to real politics. And if you stayed through the end and watched the end credits, there's a little puppet thing that goes through and shows a lot of violence, that, you know, racial violence, and connects it all to the idea of this Candyman spirit. So that part was well thought out and cool. But I mean, it's just, you know, there's definitely some marked for death characters who show up. There's like an art critic lady who you just know is going to die the second you see her. There's just different characters that happens with, but everybody I don't know. There's certain kind of fun that this movie's having that I think you might not be expecting when you hear people talk about the grimness of it and the brutality of it and the racial themes and stuff. So I guess I would kind of mirror a lot of what you said, Ronald. It's not perfect, but it is very well made and it's very well acted. And there's a couple of good characters in there, and there's a couple of gross out moments, and there's a couple of surprising, like the rhythm of the death scenes. There's some creativity in how that is done. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Like, I actually thought it was neat. I love when they do something special for a movie, like as far as like how the opening is treated. Ronald, did you notice that all the logo cards were backwards? Like it was a mirror?
No,
like when all the production logos that come up at the beginning were reversed, as though you were looking at them in a mirror.
That's really cool.
A really cool touch. But I mean, so yeah, everybody thought they were doing something kind of cool with this, and I think for the most part they were right.
Yeah, I think the cool part about this movie, they did so much world building that the next one will absolutely be a slasher.
Could be,
but it opened it up for it to be just a slasher if you wanted it to be, with some cool.
But there's this new wrinkle of when Candyman shows up, who's he going to kill and why? That is it's a cool wrinkle to add to this character. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
Trying to think of a moment or a performance to point out, but you know, what's his name? Coleman Domingo. Is that his name?
Yes.
Yeah.
Man, fucking on fire.
How many voices does he have?
I love his main, like, I could speak and you can hear me for 10 miles, you know. He needs to start getting those Paul Winfield, Keith David, Morgan Freeman narrating jobs, you know. He just needs to be out there. But no, he's got that enunciation that you just feel it in your gut. He's great. He's great.
Coleman,
man. I haven't seen it yet, but I was going to mention there was a really cool video I saw on I think it's Fandango that does the series, but it's like a scene breakdown series. It's kind of like Anatomy of a Scene. I don't think that's what theirs is called, but I think that might be the Variety one. But they did one with Nia for Candyman, and she kind of goes through. And again, having not seen it, there's no spoilers in this video for anybody that's interested to watch it. She kind of goes through like a lot of the like puppet scenes and like kind of how they shot those, and like talks about like the production house that actually like did that. It's all real, and like things like that. Like all that stuff was like really cool, and even just like the social dynamics behind why she wanted to do that was, I think, very interesting. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm still looking forward to seeing it. Hopefully I can get out and check it out soon.
It did really well.
I was like, my question for you two, real quick. So it overperformed.
Yeah.
You know, it's still in that weird like 20 to 30 range.
First movie by a black woman director that went to #1. Is that right?
Yeah.
Correct.
What the fuck?
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's awesome. I hate those firsts, though.
Me too, man. It's 2021.
You feel like, really good for like a second, and then you go, oh, wait, that's kind of stupid. But, hey, I mean, that's awesome for her, especially because she's doing that thing now that a lot of these, I mean, she's stepping into the Marvel world right now, shooting the sequel to Captain Marvel. So,
yeah.
So hold on, let me back up. My question for you two, having seen it, so yeah, it overperforms a bit. You know, it's still in that like little ceiling that we talk about in that 20 to 30 range for these kinds of movies. But what do you think the drop off is going to be this weekend?
What else is coming out? Oh, Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi.
Yeah, it's going to be an immense drop off.
Okay.
Because there's a Marvel movie that's, I mean, you know, like if you're looking at like what's going to pull people away, if you're going to the theater this weekend, I don't know. Maybe it's good counter programming to a slick family superhero film, though. You know, maybe the numbers won't go down significantly. But I feel like a lot of the people who went out to go see Candyman last weekend are going to go see Shang-Chi this week. I don't think that there's like, you know what I mean? I don't think there's like a different audience there.
Yeah.
Well, the good part is the budget was $25 million and the box office is 31 right now. So like that alone is a victory. Like I said, you know, I've been championing PVOD. Like if it drops off and it goes to PVOD, this thing is gonna do fucking numbers.
Well, even if it didn't drop, I think this is one of those qualifiers for like the Universal 17-day window. So you know, so
it's
like
17 days now.
That I think they have. Well, that's what their deal has been, like since this pandemic. Like Universal has that deal.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to react to like shit. 17.
If you were in person, you would have grabbed Steve by the lapels. What day is it?
17 days.
Yeah, like when they did when they flexed the, you know, they dropped Trolls, you know, that whole shitstorm that happened. Like their agreement with like AMC, I think it's also maybe with Regal and Cinemark, was that like they would still release them theatrically for you know, they have the right to exercise a 17-day window of taking it to PVOD at that time, you know, which times up with like 2 weekends, and then they would release it probably that Tuesday, the week, you know, after weekend 2. And yeah, it's like one of those things where like, you know, you've seen them do it for a lot of their movies, but then you see certain movies, whether it's the filmmaker that had some sort of contract, like I think M. Night has for Old, that's not gone to any kind of window early. I think that's getting a full like 90-day apparently. Or like a Fast 9, which obviously is like their big smash box office movie, so they're not going to put that. They still put it on PVOD early, but you know, not the 17-day. But I can see a movie like Candyman, like you're saying, even if it didn't drop crazy, it's going to have, you know, with that 20 opening, it's not going to really realize a massive box office, even if it holds well.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great candidate for, you know, getting it onto PVOD, especially going into like the middle end of September. You know, like this is just great timing. And that movie I think would really, really kill on video on demand for sure.
Yeah.
That's when I hope we can see it.
Congratulations to that movie, man. Seriously.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. So let's go.
You guys want to talk about some happy little clouds?
Yeah, let's talk about some happy little clouds.
Well, Steve, since you didn't get to opine much in the last segment, why don't you tell us how you felt about? What's the name of the movie? Happy Accidents? Is that the name of it?
I don't know actually. Like the full name, I think it's Happy Accidents, Betrayal and Greed or something.
Yeah,
it's got something in there. It's like it's Bob Ross is like the
Netflix
art.
Bob Ross doc is what you need to know. Right.
Yeah.
That's what everybody's calling it. Yeah.
Look in the trending titles. Look in the top, 10. And I'm sure it's still there. But this documentary, it's like, Bob Ross is like still someone who is in the zeitgeist, who's everywhere in movies and TV shows. Like, he pops up really often in mainstream media still, which is it's really quite impressive. Yet when you watch the documentary and you kind of see possibly the staying power of his brand and like kind of where that comes from, it's a little more questionable. But to circle the idea of who this man was and like, the impact that he had with his show that most people know him from, what was it called? The Joy of Painting? Is that the series that he had?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think everybody at some point has probably seen it, at least of our generation or older. And because of the presence that it still has in pop culture, a lot of people at least know who he is and what he looks like and what he did in some way. It is really an interesting doc just to kind of see kind of where he came from. It is a little bit of I kind of felt like I don't really know. I didn't really like know what the purpose of the documentary was. Because it didn't really have like the feeling of like the Mr. Rogers documentary that we all got like a year or two ago, which would be a comparison, because this one kind of turns a bit sensational, towards the last act of the film. Not in a bad way. It's just like I don't really know. It almost feels like, the fact that you describe it as like look for the Bob Ross thing, and then you have that sub like greed and whatever. Like it just sounds more, it's got that saucy title that Netflix uses all the time in these like documentaries that they have. I don't know if that's a part of it, but an interesting character. I mean, a really, iconic person that many people know. And for me, who I didn't really know a lot about him really beyond his show, it was really interesting to kind of hear about his beginnings and like, getting this show to where it was by the time that it became like this iconic thing. And it's just one of these stories where, you just like end it where you kind of want a little bit of a downer, because you just realize how fucked up shit gets when money gets involved. You know what I mean? Like, and I know it's hard to avoid a lot of times, but it's one of those downer notes where it's just like people get screwed, money gets taken, and the brand, the license, the legacy of somebody is just really out of their control, and that's really sad.
Yeah.
Right, and out of the control of the people they would have take it over for them. Yeah, you were mentioning the Mr. Rogers documentary, and I was watching this show, thinking like Bob Ross does have that place in our culture, like Mr. Rogers or Richard Simmons, even where it's just like it's people can like put their own needs into this person, because this person seems to be there in a very positive way, like a very non-denominational almost, but Jesus-like persona who is just giving of themselves. It seems to be that way. But the documentary it made me think of was one I recommended to you both that I saw at, can't remember which festival it was, that we did the virtual version of, but Clay Dream, the one that was about Will Vinton and Claymation Studios. It was similar to that one in that kind of story, like the turn it takes, where it's like the if you know the narrative, then you're going, well, there's no real redemption here. But you're watching this documentary, and it's interesting that you put it that way, Steve, to say I didn't know what the point of this was. It's interesting with the documentary. You do sometimes think like, well, what's the broader story here? What's the point that it's making? And I would say that the scandal, like, it's infuriating, but it's also kind of mundane in the extreme. Yeah. So it's like this weird feeling you have at the end where it's more like, to add to what you said, Steve, it's like it takes what this guy did for people and it reduces it down to this thing that is impossible to feel good about. Which, it does leave you feeling kind of shitty at the end, as opposed to the way that it felt a few months ago or last year when his show made it to Netflix and everybody was kind of talking about this almost meditative. Like now that we have ASMR as a subgenre of videos you can watch or audio you can play, people realize Bob Ross was ASMR before there was ASMR.
Yeah, for real.
Right.
And I remember my grandmother used to have an easel propped up in the den and watch this show, and she would paint along with him. And she became a fairly gifted, painter in her older age. I don't know how much of it she did as a kid, but she, we still around the family, we still have some of her canvases. And she it wasn't like aping his kind of style, and she didn't finish a painting in a half hour all the time, but she did do that. And when this documentary gets to the part where he figured that most of his audience was women, and so he adopted this kind of sensual quality, like it really made me think about my grandma, old Lenora, standing in there, painting with him. Maybe she was going, whew, this young Mr. Ross, or this fella, he's very but no, I do think people just, you like him. There's not a moment of this movie where you see footage of him. It's like Fred Rogers in that way, and Will Vinton to some extent, where you're just like, no, I just the reason why this person made it to a certain point is because of that, is because they really did give off this vibe, and there don't seem to be any major skeletons in this guy's closet, or they would have maybe made it in the doc. So I think we can sort of say Bob Ross seems like he was a pretty good guy. And therefore, by extension, our friend Bob Rose, who's one letter off, is also a pretty good guy. Yeah. But in fact, let's get Bob Rose to play Bob Ross in some kind of our version of an unauthorized biopic.
I'd watch
I'm
that.
taking notes. I'm taking notes for Schmovie Studios here. So just
Bob
let
Rose
it go, John. I got
is
it.
Bob Ross.
Got it.
Right.
What about you? What about you, Rana? What was your take? What did you think about it?
I think that the purpose that this really serves, I mean, on top of just highlighting how great of a person he was, I think for a really long time, cautionary tales about artists and their works weren't presented in a way that really helped the person watching it understand how something could be taken from you from right under you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of the times, whether it was like, Stax Records or, Motown, or you hear these stories about people not getting what they're owed and it not being presented in its wholeness. Because sometimes you're like, how could this? That would never happen to me. I'm smart enough to not get bamboozled. And what you find out very quickly is that doesn't happen like that. It's a little more subtle than that. It's a little more nuanced. And there aren't a lot of movies that really highlight it quite as well as this did. That's one. And then two, I think people have to really understand that, like, villains don't die. I think that's like this like American idea that like the villain dies in the end or justice is served to. I know a lot of villains that have lived for a really long time and are very alive and well, and like these people who took from Bob Ross and live in DC right now. These people are old and are very alive, living outside of DC, and are rich. So don't think that when somebody steals from you or does something like this that they're gonna get their comeuppance. You have to fight, and he shouldn't feel, in the end, the things that work themselves out or don't work themselves out, I don't think that the parties involved should feel like they lost, because at least you fought, because that's half the thing. Like to say that you fought to get the property back is half the battle. And sometimes you lose. And I think that has been presented to us for so long, especially in America, that villains are just gonna they're gonna melt into a pile of steam. When really, in actuality, Trump is gonna live to be 130. I hope you understand that. I hope that people understand that, like, this is gonna be the case. Like,
we understand it.
You understand, John.
No, but I'm
Steve,
just saying
it's
why we look so glum all the time. Is because
but like I think that these tales have to be told. I think that there has to be some like realism put in these documentaries as well. Sure, there's some sensationalism, but there's a lot of realism about the way that things get stolen from people. And it hurt my heart. But I'm glad that it was highlighted. So that's what I took away from it. It's a beautiful. I think that Bob Ross was such an impactful person in all of our lives and everybody that I know. And I don't think that anything's lost in this story about his property and his intellectual property. I still love him the same way, and I hope that nobody comes out of this like, well, I'm never gonna watch anything he does ever again because I don't want to support A, B, and C, but I think that's losing sight of what he meant to people. I say watch it. It brings me a lot of joy to see him talking. I don't know. Painting.
Yeah, it's very transportive to like you were saying, John, like just to watch the clips. Even like when he'd go on like a talk show, like he was still so in control of what he looked like, what he sounded like, how he interacted with like a live show. Like it was still the same sound, the same tone, the same meter of how he would speak. And it was like so consistent that like, even if he was adjusting that for that character, for that show, for that brand, it was like, it was always reliable. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like every little clip you see, you're just like, God damn, I'm like relaxing just listening to him.
and I'm an erratic motherfucker. You know what I mean? It's like, I realized by comparison, it's like, boy, it's like watching, it's amazing seeing someone who has that level of self-control. And there's that clip of him on Regis and Kathy Lee where it's very silly, but it's very sweet, where Kathy Lee and Regis are painting with him and they're doing their paintings. And Regis at some point actually says like, look at me, I'm painting. And the audience actually goes, ah! And I got like I was like, that's so sweet. That actually got to me. I was like, that's what Bob Ross did. I mean, like, if you want to say, that's why I'm glad they have like art world people in this documentary talking about what you call his style of painting, that it's not just like a party trick. I mean, it is a kind of party trick, and it is kind of a style. You can just whip these out, but you still have to have an eye. You still have to have those techniques, and he did cook those images up out of his memory. So you still have to have like a love of like some of those natural forms and some understanding of how they work. But also he was just so up on like pleasing yourself and painting the picture you wanted to paint, and seeing Regis Philbin get excited like that. It's like, it felt legitimate and childlike. And I think that it was cool to see that illustrated because it's like the moment in the Mr. Rogers documentary where the little kid is talking to him and the kid turns to the puppet and talks to the puppet, you know, or at least they talk about that effect where it's like, there's magic. These people, the reason why we talk about them, what you said, Ronald, the reason why they linger for us in the culture and we want to hold on to their memory a little bit is there's some magic there. And, you know, you can't manufacture it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So the last one that we have, so again, that's on Netflix.
Yes.
I'm sure you can see it in your trending line, your row. It's in the top 10 currently as we're recording this still. But the last one we wanted to mention was a new comedy that came out this past Friday on Hulu. I think this was something that what studio was it with, Ronald? Like we were trying to get access to it to screen prior.
It was
Disney, right?
Disney, yeah, but it's like Fox. But Focus
right.
Was it Focus or something like that?
No, I think it was Fox.
It was Fox. Okay.
Fox, and then like the whole Disney thing not coming out. They put it on Hulu. So this is it's comedy. Right, and this is a comedy.
Yeah, absolutely.
No question.
Get into this, man.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of Vacation Friends? This is the new comedy on Hulu that we're going to talk about.
John.
I every time I thought, okay, this movie's formulaic and kind of weak sauce, something would charm me. Some moment would get under my skin. The actors are all really good. The vibe is good. The energy is good. Like even within the sort of plot developments you expect from this kind of, you know, I mean, it feels like it feels like a script that Vince Vaughn didn't shoot back in 2002 or something, and they brought it back up and updated it for these performers. But hey, guess what? Lil Rel, John Cena, these are fun actors to watch. They're trying. There's chemistry. The wife characters, which I hate to put it that way, but so often those characters are afterthoughts in these types of movies. They have a little bit more going on. I actually thought that Meredith Hagner was really fun.
She's great.
And Yvonne Orji.
Was super. Like, I don't know. I just thought that all these performers were so likable that every time I started to think, this movie's like, you put it in that category of like, oh, this is kind of cute, but it's not really that great. I don't know. I was consistently, I will say, charmed by Vacation Friends, and that was my general feeling I took away from it. Was I sort of enjoyed watching these characters hang out. I know that sounds silly, but like it was a sort of sweet movie, you know. And you know, maybe it goes on a little long, and there's some parts that really don't work and some gags that go nowhere, but there's something about, and I've never been like this biggest John Cena fan either, but this was the movie where I was like, yeah, I can kind of see how he can kind of create this little sub career for himself as like a guy who's willing to laugh at himself, and he can do it, and he can be credible. He's got this eager puppy dog quality in this movie that is just really infectious in a way. And I think Lil Rel, it's great to see him play like the sort of straight man role. I think he does a good job with that. And there's some, you know, he's got some moments where he goes off that are funny too. It's kind of like a C level script given like B+ effort, and it you know, pulls through for that reason, I think.
Yeah. Steve,
you very clearly want to say something last, right? No, I agree, man. Like I feel like I had trouble convincing Erin to watch this with me, and like I slowly noticed her like pulling in more to watch it more and more with me, like because I kind of agree. Like, you know, it's like it's better than I feel like it should be. You know, like the script is not great. There's some holes in it, and there's like, you know, some beats that don't really hit. But I think it comes down to the performances, and I think it's also okay that it's just like a fun comedy. You know, like I feel like it's fine that we watch these movies every once in a while, and it doesn't need to be, you know, anything special, especially because like we don't get a lot of like straight comedies that are
Yeah.
even watchable sometimes. You know what I mean? Like some of these have been really bad recently, and it's really sad, especially because it feels like a lot of comedies really aren't even going to theaters anymore. So it's like a hard gauge of like, well, is this going to actually be good, or is it going to like another movie that gets dumped somewhere? But I was really pleasantly surprised how much I laughed. I thought the core four of the movie that John mentioned, the two couples, I think the chemistry among the couples and really crisscross, however way you look at it, was really fun and really worked. John Cena and Meredith Hagner, like their scenes together, I thought were just. I found them to be pretty hilarious, actually, in some of those scenes that where it just spirals out, and she's like kind of just going off about stuff. Like I thought that was really funny, and you know, Lil Rel's like relationship with his fiance's father. I think those scenes were pretty funny too, especially when John Cena kind of gets into the mix of it. But yeah, all in all, I mean, this is like I've already kind of recommended it to like a handful of people. It's like you just want like a straight up comedy that I think is pretty funny and easy to watch, and it flies by too. Definitely, it's something I would recommend. I was surprised how much I actually liked it.
Cool.
What'd you think, Ronald?
So I kind of agree with what John said about the script, but there's something about this script that kind of elevates it in a way that is super important to me. Is that sometimes when I'm watching people on screen that look like me, there's like a heightened version of a person that I'm watching. And because this movie didn't have that, it did something to the performances. It elevated it. It elevated the script even more than it was supposed to. The decision to just let these people be people.
Yeah,
is
definitely.
some like it, I don't have a lot of things to point at. I've been watching movies. I'm 38, been watching movies for 30, I'll say 37 years. And you don't see very many things where you have leads that are black that just are just people in spaces with friends and getting into chaos. And
like his whole thing is that he's uptight, but that's it. There's no other like, you're right. There's not any of that kind of whatever stereotypical kind of performance stuff you sometimes expect in comedies like this. You're right.
There's one reference to it, and that's when they're on a jet ski, and that's like about the extent of like Aaron and I talking. Like, oh man, that's some like weird, that there's something about that that just makes this a little more magical. If I show it to somebody, and they're like, man, what did I just watch? Like these people are this is just a comedy that I can show to anybody, and they will feel this like thing for it because it doesn't feel like it has too much put on it besides just the tension that's built in the story. And God, man, it felt like liberating. It felt like I watched this movie. I didn't have a shit ton of terrible things to say. Okay, sure, it might have been mediocre towards the end. Like it resolved itself in a weird way, but goddamn, like I love that. I love that I can watch a movie with people that are just people, and it feels like, oh man, this could happen again. They're doing a sequel, Honeymoon Friends, and like I'm fucking happy, man.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
they just Deadline just reported that Honeymoon Friends is coming out, and the same guy's directing it, and it just sounds like a cool. Like I want to see more things like this.
There's something to that concept too. That about midway through the movie, you feel the real hook of the person you are on vacation having to reconcile with the person you are back in the world.
Yes.
And again, I think that is real. That has some actual depth to it. And I'm not saying the movie gets into that major philosophical idea, but there is that point where the midpoint in the movie when the vacation's over and these people want to stay friends, and you see that Lil Rel and Orgy, is that her name really? Am I saying her name?
Yeah, Yvonne Orgy.
Okay, Yvonne Orgy. That she's like, That sounded like
No, I understand.
They you can see what they want. You can see that they expect maybe they can leave these people behind, and then when they run into them in the airport, it's this different environment and it has a different feel, and it really is like, oh, this is the sort of domestic horror movie aspect of this. Is the sort of like what stays in Vegas isn't staying in Vegas sort of in this movie, and I think that is there is something palpable about that fear. And again, you're right, Ronald, that at that point there's nothing. I actually saw an article that was saying that this movie should have dealt more with the kind of racial politics of the difference between the characters, but I was kind of glad it didn't. And based on what you said, I'm really glad it didn't, because I feel like that would have gotten kind of messagey and it would have trampled over the beauty of what you're describing, Ronald, which is just this movie doesn't comment on what it's doing. It just does something kind of quietly bold by almost like having characters where it's like you could have swapped in other actors to play these characters. Like there's nothing that feels profiled about the characters, and that might be a weird way to put it, but I know exactly what you mean.
Because in order to, if you were to put that on it, it'd be like if all of us were talking and I was like, that lamp, that's some black people shit. That TV, that's some white people shit. That you're like, nobody fucking talks like that in real life.
Yeah.
Except when you're like on stage doing stand up. Like I think there's just this real overcompensation for that sometimes that I see in movies that I don't have around my friends. Like that happen to be white. Yeah. Like I don't understand why that's even thrown in all the time. So
right.
I loved it. I loved that part of it. I thought that it was a solid movie. It was fun as hell. Yeah, man. I enjoyed it.
I like Murillo, the guy who worked at the spot.
Oh yeah. No, yeah,
it's like you start off thinking he's competent, and then you realize he's just not. No, him blowing up The Secret. That's the thing that made me laugh so much. Was him just like. Anyway, go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going to say I checked out the article Ron was talking about, and I think another takeaway is like this is huge for the show or the movie. Their Hulu is saying in their announcement that it was like the highest viewed original film on Hulu, like which is. That's massive, because like that means like they were boasting so much about Palm Springs last year as being this massive debut, which apparently this outperformed, which is it's amazing. I mean, John Cena, he's like mentioning him specifically, John, like he's got this like niche now, like he's got this Peacemaker series, now he's got this sequel on Hulu, he's got like this like streaming success, you know what I mean? I don't know what Peacemaker's going to look like, but I mean that's a really big win for him.
This movie made me more excited to see Peacemaker than Suicide Squad. Now, I'm not saying anything about preferring this movie to Suicide Squad. I'm just saying after the Suicide Squad, I didn't necessarily need more Peacemaker. I was like, of all the characters, I don't know that I want to spend one more second with this guy. But after this, I was like, okay, I see how John Cena might be able to thread the needle and be like a lovable buffoon. On top of being a terrible jingoistic, whatever we want to call Peacemaker. So I feel like if that's where they're going with that character, then, that I can tolerate that. But no, everybody seems to be having fun in it too. And I think maybe we've said that, but I think that's something that carries over in a movie at times. It's just you feel like they were. I mean, I would be sad to hear Lil Rel and John Cena hated each other on set, because it feels like the opposite is happening. It feels like they're really feeding off. There's the little thing with kissing each other on the forehead was so
that
funny.
Was so good, man.
It was so good, and when he does it, oh well, yeah. I don't know, little that bromance or whatever aspect I felt like was handled in a way that was it was sweet. It was well done. So
that's what really works so well. Like I feel like in the part of the movie where they're like spending their vacation with them, and it's that moment that you're saying like this is like can be quite horrific, like how bad things could go, but like there's this constant undercurrent of like these people are like out there and they're kind of crazy, but like they actually are like really nice people.
Like can't stay mad at them.
They really genuinely like are caring about the two leads. You know what I mean? Like in ways that it seems like people in their personal life and their family like don't, which is like I think reassuring, and like it's different for them. I think it's like kind of what hooks them a little bit. And I think that's really kind of what works the most about like that whole meet cute area of the movie, like when they have their meetup, is that like John Cena and what was her name? his wife in the movie.
Meredith Hagner.
Meredith, yeah.
But Kyla, Kyla is
from,
her character.
From Search Party. It's what I remember her from.
And she had a small part in Palm Springs too. She was the girlfriend at the beginning.
Oh, right.
Right. There's just something about them. Like there's like this genuineness to like, even though they're silly and out there and causing havoc and trouble everywhere they go, it seems like there's like this, like they genuinely are like trying to be friends with you, and like they are trying to give, you care, like maybe you're missing in life, which seemed like those characters might have been. But I don't know, maybe it's a little deeper than it needs to go, but this is just a fun movie. Yeah. I think we all really, really enjoyed it more than we thought we would. I know personally it was,
I did.
I was looking forward to seeing it, but
sometimes you want like a snack.
Watch it again.
Sometimes you want like a good fast food chicken sandwich or something like that. This is that movie.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch. So, this is definitely one we're recommending. This is on Hulu now. Obviously, tons of people have already watched it, but find it if you're looking for a comedy, want to just kind of feel good, laugh a little bit. It's definitely. I think it will satisfy that for you. I think we all do. So. What else? Anything else, guys? Are we good?
That's all I watched.
Enough?
I just want to mention one thing. I saw the Mortal Kombat sequel, the animated sequel, Battle of the Realms. It's the sequel to Mortal Kombat Legends: Scorpion's Revenge. Warner Brothers Animation. It's solid, man. It's a follow-up to a very, very violent cartoon, and it's a very, very violent. They get more into the actual tournament, kind of the thing that we wished for the Mortal Kombat live action, but it gets more into the actual tournament and world domination. It's worth checking out if you want to see people get decapitated and blood splatter in full 4K animation. But it's fun and crazy. And
what is that on? Is that on HBO Max?
It's on PVOD right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it just came out. The 31st, I believe it came out. So, Mortal Kombat Legends: Battle of the Realms, really, 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 really entertaining.
Cool.
All
right, man. Well, moviesmovie.com is the site. You can find all of our episodes there. You can subscribe to the podcast there on any platform that you might follow podcasts on. If one of them happens to be one that has a review option or a rating option, and I know they all have share options. So if you could do any of those three things wherever you're listening to us, post it on social media, text it to a friend, whatever, we'd appreciate it. Anything like that obviously helps get the word out. And if you can review it on that platform, obviously it helps people looking for movie podcasts, because there's only 2 out there. We just want to be the one that they hear about before the other one. That would be appreciated. And I don't know what we got planned for next week. I know there's a couple new releases coming out. Maybe if we have a chance, if any of us check out Shang-Chi, we can talk about that a little bit. I'm not sure if that'll happen or not. Maybe. But we'll figure something out. It'll be fun. It always is. And
it's always fun.
We'll be here same time next week. And we'll see you guys then. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.